I noticed the polling data I keep hearing about is that I'm between 42 and 46% favorable rating, et cetera. But everybody running for re-election in this time has been in the same position. There's nothing new about that. You're making it sound like Biden's really underwater. When the same polling data asks whether they think what kind of job I've done, it gets overwhelmingly positive results.
No, it actually isn't. That was President Biden yesterday shrugging off recent poor poll numbers. A new Fox News poll finds 55% of registered voters disapprove of his job performance overall. 63% of voters disapprove of the job he's doing on the economy. And a whopping 70% of those polled say that the economy is getting worse for their families. That's 3 times the number who feel it's getting better. Lee Carter, your reaction.
I mean, I don't know what polls he's looking at. There's not
I'm looking at any poll.
There's not a measure that he's doing better. It's the same thing as him saying the economy's fine. The economy's not fine. There's a few things here that I think are really, really bad for him. When you look at some of these things, 70% are dissatisfied with how things are going in this country. That's more than just what they're talking about the economy. It's just some of the worst polling about how people feel about the economy since 2006. 70% say they think that the economy is working. 40% think his policies are making inflation worse. 36% say there's no difference in inflation as a result of what he's doing. There's not a measure that he's doing well in. When you look at how he's performing on the economic measures, when you look at how he's performing on immigration, when you look at how he's performing on even gun control, issues that should favor him with the population, he's not above water anywhere.
It's also foreign policy. You're talking largely about economic issues, but when you look at the foreign policy situation after the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, our adversaries got on the march. Look at China, Mark.
Yeah, and that's why they're flexing on us. That's why they're getting more aggressive. Obviously, President Biden is not doing well in the polls, but to kind of look at this and take politics out of it and just look at some economic data. Yesterday, we had the consumer confidence number come out.
Big number.
When you look at the expectations part of that number, the expectations part came in at 68. That is incredibly low. That shows that people are not confident about our future. And at 68, that has continued to trend lower throughout President Biden's time in office, which is not good. It's showing that if you take politics out of the equation, whether you're Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter. People feel worse about what's going to happen a year or two from today than they did in 2019.
And the same goes for crime, Joe Borelli. I mean, you know, this is not a political issue. This is not Republican or Democrat. We're all afraid of crime.
No, the only thing worse than his foreign agenda is his domestic policy with, as you pointed out, crime, with the Inflation Reduction Act only increasing inflation. I looked at this poll and all the other polls that were recently conducted to find one thing positive about Joe Biden. And the only thing I can come up with is that Democrats have reported in polls that they will come home when it's time to vote against Donald Trump, or when it's time to vote against, even if it's Ron DeSantis. That said, most Americans think this guy should be gumming his eggs and taking his kids to a baseball game. And I think his biggest vulnerability is going to be this weekend at Bernie's scenario, where the American public are seeing this person decline in real time. It's almost, if he wasn't political, we would all feel sorry for him.
And look, Democrats, even though they are still supporting him, his approval rating is only between 83 and 85% of Democrats. President Trump never went below 90% with his base. And really, really jarring for the president is 43% of voters say they are less excited to vote for him than they were 4 years ago. That is not good. Voter enthusiasm is a really big deal. Your excitement to go and vote dictates whether or not you're going to go the day of, that you're going to make plans and all of that. I think that is going to be a big problem for him.
By the way, you said that he's at an 80% approval rating within Democrats?
Within Democrats.
I find that number high, too.
How many more tricks does he have up his sleeve? I mean, the major trick leading into the 2020 election was hiding in the basement, staying away from the camera. The biggest trick he had up his sleeve for the midterms was lying to the American public about forgiving student loans.
That's exactly right.
Okay? What is the next trick? Like, I mean, that's what I'm wondering.
It's going to be abortion. It's going to, like, look, the day after, the day he announces, what do? They put Kamala in front of a big reproductive rights sign. She attempted to deliver a speech on that. That is a very important issue to voters. 58% of people are saying that that's going to be a primary driver. 2/3 of people who are pro-choice say that's going to be the reason they vote. Republicans have to have an answer for that. That's what Joe Biden's going to run on. That's what Kamala is going to be talking about. And hopefully we have an answer for it.
Karl Rove in the Journal this morning, Joe Biden's second basement campaign. A 3-minute video issued at the crack of dawn Tuesday was a strange way to launch the president's re-election bid, writes Karl Rove in the Journal this morning.